You own a speed square. I'd bet money you use about a third of it. Most folks grab it for one thing. They lay it on a board, they run a pencil down the edge, they get a straight line across, and they set it back on the bench. That little triangle can do 6 or 8 jobs, and most people never learn but the one. Let me show you something. My old man handed me one of these back in '74, first real tool that was mine. He told me a carpenter who knows his square doesn't need half the gadgets in the catalog. 45 years later, I know he was right. So let's go around this whole tool, corner to corner, and I'll show you everything it really does. Start with that fat lip on the one edge, that raised flange, the part that sticks up a little proud of the rest. That lip is the whole secret. You hook it over the edge of your board, snug against the wood, and now the square can't wander on you. Run your pencil down the 90-degree side, and you've got a line dead square to the edge. That's the job everybody knows. Fine. But that lip is why every other trick works, so keep it in mind. Now flip your attention to the long, slanted side, the hypotenuse, the diagonal. Hook that same lip on your board and mark along that angled edge, and you just drew a 45. No measuring, no math. Square gives you 90 on one side and 45 on the other, every time, just by which edge you follow. Here's where most people stop. Here's where it gets good. See the corner where the two short sides meet? On most squares, it's stamped right there, the word pivot. That corner is a hinge. Keep the lip touching your board at that one point and swing the rest of the square like a door. As you swing, watch the numbers running along that long diagonal edge. Those aren't inches, those are degrees. That's a protractor hiding in plain sight. Say you want a 20-degree line. You hold that pivot corner tight to the edge, you swing the square until the number 20 on the diagonal scale lines up with the edge of your board, and you hold her right there. Now draw your line along the short side. 20 degrees, clean, no protractor, no guessing. 30, 45, 53. Any angle you like, the square gives it to you. I've cut a whole run of stair brackets that way and never touched a fancy tool. Let me rehook you here, because this next part is the one nobody shows you. That angle scale doesn't just draw angles, it reads them. You've got a board, a rafter, a brace, something already set at a slope, and you want to know what that slope actually is. Lay a small level right on the flat back of your square. Set the pivot corner against your sloped piece. Now tip the whole works until that bubble sits dead center, level. Look where the material crosses your degree scale. That number is the angle of your piece, measured off level. You just reverse engineered a slope with a triangle and a bubble. Roofers do it all day. And if you don't have a level handy, here's an old one. Tie a string to a little weight, a nut, a fishing sinker, anything with heft. Hang it off the pivot corner and let it settle. That's a plumb line. And plumb just means straight up and down the way gravity pulls, the way a dropped rock falls. When that string hangs quiet against your degree scale, it's telling you level and plumb without a single battery. My grandfather framed barns with nothing but that. String never needs calibrating. Now look along the inside of that lip. See those little slots cut in a row? Those notches? That's your scribe guide, and it's a gem. Hook the lip on your board's edge, drop your pencil tip into one of those notches, and pull the square down the length of the board with the pencil riding in the slot. You just drew a perfect straight line running the whole length, parallel to the edge, no chalk line, no straight edge. The notches step out in even marks so you can pick your distance. That's how you rip a cabinet back to width or set a reference line down a long shelf. Slow and steady, and don't let that lip pop off the edge or your line wanders. All right, now the part this tool was actually born for, and the part almost nobody uses. Speed square is really a rafter square. That's its Sunday name. Look at the face and you'll see two scales you've probably ignored your whole life. One marked common, one marked hip and valley. Those are for cutting roof rafters, and once you see how they work, you'll never look at this triangle the same. A roof's steepness is called pitch. Pitch is just rise over run. For every 12 inches a rafter runs out flat, how many inches does it climb? Climb 6 for every 12 out. That's a 6-12 pitch. That's all it means. The plans tell you the number. Here's the magic. Say your pitch is 6. Hook the lip on your rafter board, set the pivot corner, and swing the square until the 6 on that common scale meets the edge of the board. Mark along the square. That line is your plumb cut, the cut that stands straight up and down when the rafter's up on the roof. That's the top end that leans against the ridge board running down the peak. One motion, no trig, the square did the math 100 years ago and stamped it right on the face. Down the rafter, you cut a notch called the bird's mouth. That's the little V that sits down over the top of your wall, so the rafter locks on instead of just resting there. You mark it with that same 6 on the common scale for the plumb part, and there's usually a notch or a mark right at the tip of the square for laying out the seat, the flat part that beds on the wall. Figuring how far down the rafter that notch goes, that's a measuring job for another morning. But the angles all come off this one little tool. Now the hip and valley scale, the one that really separates the folks who know from the folks who guess. A hip is the outside corner where two roof slopes meet and run up. A valley is the inside gutter where they meet and run down. The rafter that runs up that corner sits at an angle across the roof, so it travels farther to climb the same height. That means its pitch isn't the same as your common rafters. If you cut it with the common numbers, it won't fit. It'll sit proud or sit low and fight you the whole way. The square already solved it. Use the same pitch number, but read it off the hip and valley scale instead of the common. Mark your plumb cut off that line, and that hip rafter drops right into the corner like it grew there. First time I trusted that scale instead of my own arithmetic, I saved myself half a Saturday. 45 years, and it still works every time. One more, and it might be the handiest of the lot. Your square is a truth teller. As long as you haven't dropped it on concrete and knocked it out of true, that 90-degree corner is dead accurate. So use it to check your other tools. Unplug your circular saw first, always. Never mess with a saw that can still spin. Then set the square against the flat shoe and up against the blade, and see if that corner sits tight all the way with no daylight. If light shows through, your saw's out of square, and every cut you've made is off a hair. Check your table saw fence, your miter, a glued-up corner, a door frame. This little triangle keeps the rest of your shop honest. So there it is, the whole tool. Straight lines and 45s, any angle you want, a slope reader, a plumb line, a scribe, a rafter master, and a square that checks every other square in the building. Go pull yours off the wall tonight. Find that pivot corner. Find those two rafter scales you've been walking past for years and swing it once just to feel it work. You've been carrying a whole toolbox in one flat triangle and only using one corner of it. Now you know the rest. All right, that's one more off the bench. Keep 'em sharp and don't be a stranger.